Hello, I'm Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent McCory in for hashtag the U Word. It's Tuesday, January 4th. This is Africa 54.
Grim new findings show over 4,000 migrants were lost at sea bound for Spain in 2021. More than double the previous year. An ambulance service in Nairobi's largest alternative dwelling site helps the city's poorest, and how modernization and growth are threatening traditional architecture in Mali's capital of Bamako.
Over 4,000 migrants, including at least 200 children, were lost at sea trying to reach Spain in 2021, according to a monitoring group. That's more than double the figure from 2020, and the most since the group began counting in 2018. Walking Borders blames increasingly dangerous routes, inferior boats, and the fear of some vessels to help migrants at sea for the surge in deaths. Spanish statistics reveal that 39,000 undocumented migrants successfully reached Spain by sea or land last year, a similar figure to the previous year. Walking Borders says more than 90% of those missing or dead were lost on 124 shipwrecks en route to Spain's Canary Islands in the Atlantic Ocean as of December the 20th. The man accused of setting South Africa's parliament complex on fire appeared in a Cape Town courtroom Tuesday. Authorities say they have finally contained the fire, which gutted large parts of the historic parliament buildings. 49-year-old Zandile Christmas Mafe was in court Tuesday to face several charges in connection with the parliament fire, including arson, breaking and entering, and theft. Prosecutors say the suspect was caught by police with an explosive device and with stolen laptop, document and crockery. The alleged Mafe, a South African national, set fire to the parliamentary precinct, parts of which are 138 years old, using explosives or flammable liquid. Mafe's lawyer says his client denies all the charges. Mali is well known for its mud brick Sudano-Sahelian architecture, which is also seen in buildings in Bamako, one of the fastest growing cities in Africa. But rapid modernization is also threatening the unique structures and the face of the city. Annie Risenberg has more from Bamako.
Mali's National Arts Institute, INA, resides in one of Bamako's oldest Sudano-Sahelian buildings and has trained many of Mali's famous musicians and artists. But there are concerns that it could be razed for commercial development after an unknown businessman made a deal with the government to build a new campus outside the city in exchange for the arts building. Activists like Dama Diawara, who grew up playing under the building's pillars, have for months been holding sit-in protests and looking for answers.
The architecture that they built here, if you destroy it, it's like you destroyed all of Bamako before your eyes. You know what INA represents? And you want to destroy it? You're destroying Bamako itself.
The historic buildings are sometimes referred to as colonial because most were built before Mali's independence from France in 1960. Mali's National Directorate of Cultural Heritage, NDPC, under the Ministry of Culture, says they cannot be destroyed unless they are removed from its protected list. But Director Moulay Koulibaly says Bamako is lucky to still have much of its architectural heritage intact.
These colonial buildings are subject to modernization, subject to globalization, and subject to rapid urbanization. The pressure that comes with development weighs on these buildings.
Abdoulaye Dioko is an urban planner and founder of Bamako School of Engineering, Architecture and Urbanism. He says that architecture in Mali has traditionally been adapted to the climate, culture, and geography. But as Bamako has grown at one of the fastest speeds in Africa, its distinct buildings have been replaced with modern concrete and steel structures.
In time, everything was destroyed. because we didn't follow our ancestors in making sure we have our own architecture and developing it. It's also because there wasn't an architecture code. There wasn't research.
Despite his bleak assessment of Bamako's architectural past, Dioko says he's hopeful for its future. Since the city is still developing, he says there's time to focus on constructing new buildings in the Sudano-Sahelian style. In the meantime, activists say they will continue to speak out against the destruction of Mali's historic National Arts Institute. Annie Reisenberg for VOA News, Bamako, Mali.
A community health service in Africa's largest urban slum is helping poor people get affordable emergency services during the COVID pandemic. The Kibera Community Emergency Response Team in Nairobi is offering a $1 monthly fee for access to emergency services, including an ambulance. Victoria Munga reports from Nairobi.
Poor people like those living in Nairobi's Kibera slum find it difficult to access emergency health care, even where public service such as clinics and hospitals are provided within the slums. The high cost effectively bars most Kibera residents from calling an ambulance. It's a challenge Moses Omondi, who was himself born and raised in Kibera slum, has taken on. He formed a community emergency response team that provides services to slum residents for a fee of $1 a month, including ambulance transport to the hospitals.
If you have an ambulance, you can easily access an hospital, because no hospital should deny you services when you've been taken there by an ambulance. It means it's an emergency case that need an emergency attention.
Annette Okumu is one of about 300 subscribers to the ambulance service. She says she received potentially life-saving care inside the ambulance after an accident last year.
The condition I was in wasn't that good. I was really having a very bad headache. I was bleeding, so maybe I could have overbled if I couldn't have gotten the first aid services.
The service is supported by non-profit groups and other benefactors. So far, there is one ambulance for an estimated 250,000 residents in the Kibera slum. Officials hope to increase the number to 5. Ambulance services in Kenya ordinarily cost up to $400 depending on the needs of a patient, such as a ventilator and the distance. Officials say arrangements that provide public access to affordable emergency services are especially important during the COVID era.
It's a service that people are acknowledging that they very much need, and you'll realize that people living within such settings, some of them have never called for an ambulance because they know that if they do call for an ambulance, it's never going to get there, or they'll be asked for, a lot of money that they're not able to afford.
Residents say the community service emergency response team offers hope they will have better access to health care they need. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
Women in Kenya from the pastoral Mafe community in Taita Taveta were traditionally not allowed to go out to look for food, as that was a responsibility of men. Today, however, the roles have reversed as women go out to work and provide for their families while men stay home. Juma Majanga reports for Maungu Taita Taveta on what climate change has to do with this shift of gender roles.
Zamani ushanga ambayo tulikuwa tunashona. Ushanga alikuwa anashona, ninashonea hii kidole, ninashonea masikio, ninashonea shingo. Hatuna biashara yoyote ya kuwa tunauza ushanga. Utauzia wapi? Sina juu pahali ambapo unajua. Hata tulikuwa hatujui kwanza ushanga unauzwa. Tuuzie nani?
Kina mama wa Kimasai alikuwa atoka afanya kazi kwengine. maana kuna majukumu ya nyumbani. Yeye ndio anatafuta kuni, yeye ndio anatafuta maji, yeye ndio anaenda sokoni kununua chakula ya watoto. Kazi ya mzee ni kung'ang'ana na mifugo. Najua mifugo iko mara ngapi? Mara 3. Kuna ng'ombe, kuna mbuzi, kuna ndama wale wadogo. Sasa kazi ya waume ni kazi ya mifugo peke yao. Kwa hiyo sio rahisi mama atoke aende afanye kazi kwingine, maana mzee akitoka kama anaenda kung'ang'ana na mifugo yake, anayobaki pale nyumbani ni mama. Kwa hiyo si rahisi apate nafasi ya kwenda kufanya kazi.
Mama tu ni kukaa tu kuangalia mali na kukamua na kupika basi. Mzee alikuwa anashughulika mambo zingine sote.
Sasa akishika ng'ombe mmoja ama 2 na ana mahali nzuri anafuga, kwa miaka 10 utakuja kuta hiyo ng'ombe 2 imefika ng'ombe 50. Maana ndio kazi yao. Lakini sasa kulingana na hali ya anga vile ilivyo, imekuwa ngumu pia wafuge hivyo.
There was a lot of slash and burn agriculture in this area. People could just cut down forest. We had natural water pans in the forests, but those water pans have already dried up. We had some rivers which were flowing down from the top of the hill, and that water could stay for a longer time. But these days, those rivers are no longer there. This is because of the change of weather patterns, and it's because people have destroyed the forest.
Sasa huwezi kupata mzee ako na ng'ombe 100 hapa. Kwa mfano mimi ndio nawaongoza. Niko na bibi 2. Niko na wakasa wanangu, bibi za vijana wangu 4. Jamii yote kuna mama ni 6 na ng'ombe haifiki hata 20. Silikufa hata imebaki kama ng'ombe 15 hivi. Sasa unashindwa ukigawanya hizo ng'ombe 15 kwa kina mama kwa kila nyumba pale.
Anyasa na lenyoroi anya na ribanga samu kurunyabu anyebo nwenga
Musa kwa juu kazi nyingine, kazi yake tu ni ya mfugo. Ikitaka chakula mpaka use mfugo. Sasa hizo mfugo ndio hizo sasa hausiki. Sasa tutabaki tu kuangaliana na hao wa mabusetu. Ndio sasa naweza patia ruhusa, si ndio nimekuja sasa kupatia ruhusa sasa. Aenda afanye hizo mradi. Ndio sasa tuangalia kama atapata kitu kidogo ya kulete nyumbani. Halete chakula nyumbani. Hiyo shida ya mume wangu vile amekuja paka akaja kaaga, imeletwa ni hiyo. Kumbe kitu ambayo unaizamini, unaifanya kama mtoto. Mzee wangu ameanza peresha hapo, na mwisho wake amekuja kwangu kuchukuliwa ni hiyo peresha. Amejamu tu, kumpeleka Voi hapa na ikawa ya kwake imeisha. Na peresha imekuja kwa ile mfugo yake, watoto kama hawa wote. Ng'ombe zimeisha, nitawapa nini? Tunenda tukashonee wazungu hizi bangili. Gari za wazungu zinakuja kama hapa, maana ilikuwa gari za wazungu zinakuja. Unaweka pale. Unanunuliwa penginepo, maana penginepo una nyumba moja ni shilingi 500 wala shilingi 300. Unakimbia, unajua mtoto wako atakula nini? Atakula nini?
Mwanaume sasa Kimasai sasa akifika mahali yeye anachua watoto, aisee, hiyo ndio inakuwa ngumu. Lakini sasa mama sasa ndio akaona kazi, na asipoenda hatutapata kitu, itabidi tuvumilie. Na bado kuna shughuli za mifugo pia, wadogo wadogo hao hawajatoka pia, unaangalia pia hapo. So tumekuta sasa sisi wanaume tumekuwa na kazi nyingi nyumbani kwa sababu mama kutoka kwenda kwa kazi yao ya kikundi.
Kitambo wasee ndio wanatafuta, wamama wakaa kwa nyumba, nakamua, naosha hiyo kibuyu yetu ya kukamua maziwa, alafu nafanya kazi yao kwa nyumba. Msee naenda kutafuta jioni, nakuja kukula, nafanya kazi wa boma. Lakini siku hizi wamama ndio wanatafuta, wasee siku hizi hakuna kazi. Naangalia tu watoto, mbuzi, ndio watoto ndogo ya ndama, alafu mimi naenda kutafuta na kuja kukula wote na yeye.
Wanataka mind zao zimepanuka sasa, wamekuwa na mindset tofauti. Wanataka amke, asimamie wengine, wanataka kwenda mbele, warejeste zile vikundi kama za walemavu kwao. Naona tu wamebadilika, hawako kama vile walikuwa
zamani. Ulikuwa unaambiwa kichwa ya nyumba ni nani? Kichwa ya boma, si ndio? Unaambiwa ni mwanaume. Sasa hivi mimi naona kichwa ya boma ni mwanamke. Kwa nini si kwambia hivyo mtoto wangu? Naona wajukuu wangu anatoka huko Wachija, anakimbia kuliko aende akamwambie babake nimepokuzwa skuli. Anakimbia hata kama ni kumsalamia, anamsalamia tu kwa kichwa, anakimbia. Kwa nini umekuja mama? Nimepokuzwa ni mwalimu. Nenda kwa mamako. Zamani ilikuwa kuna hiyo.
Sasa hii ukikaa mtoto anakuambia mama siende kushona, nipate chakula. Sasa utabidi utatoka. Na anajua mama ametoka, akirudi anaka mfuko ya unga. Hawezi kulala njaa.
Mimi kama mama ninafurahi, maana kama naenda nje kutafuta pesa yangu, nakuja kukula na familia yangu. Nyumba nakuwa mzuri, kama pesa ni nyingi najenga nyumba yangu. Najenga nyumba ya kupanga. Sasa hiyo kazi imekuwa mzuri sana. Naona kwa nyumba yangu iko sawa, hata kwa familia yangu. Maana kama naweza kupata pesa, hata mamangu naweza kupata kitu kidogo. Ndugu zangu sisi nakula wote.
Maisha yangu sasa hii imebadilika sana, kwa sababu vile nimeona maisha imebadilika. Watoto wanaenda mbele, kwa sababu hii pesa ambayo napata naendeleza watoto wangu kwa masomo. Na naendeleza kwa kila kitu, kwa sababu nguo ya shule mimi naendeleza. Sasa hii nimeona mbali sana, kwa sababu watoto wameenda shule kubwa sana, na kwa sababu ya hiyo miradi yangu.
Kule tumetoka tunataka tu hiyo nguo ambayo tumelikuwa tumelalia tuitupe. Tunataka nguo mpya. Tunataka mabadiliko. Ndio tunataka.
That was Juma Majanga reporting for VOA. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, why a water source for nearly 25% of the world's population is now under threat. But first, here is Haiti Adams with what's on tap for this week's edition of Straight Talk Africa.
Be sure to join me on the next Straight Talk Africa as we discuss the return of Africa's stolen art. France has repatriated 26 looted colonial-era artifacts to Benin. Now museums in Europe and the US are rethinking what to do with their African art collections. We'll speak to artists and museum curators about the colonial past of Africa's art and its future around the world. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
The glaciers in the Himalayas provide water to nearly 25% of the world's population. But the glaciers are melting at an alarming rate. VOA's Zubayd Dar tells us more in this report narrated by Bezan Handad.
6 glaciers in the Himalayas have nearly vanished since 1980, according to satellite data mapping. And researchers say hundreds of glaciers in the region are melting, all part of the impact of a warming planet.
Every year you go to a glacier, we are seeing on an average almost a meter of thickness decrease in the glaciers. So that gives you an idea about the state and the stats of the glacier melting in Jammu Kashmir.
In the Himalayan region, over 14,000 small and large alpine glaciers have been identified, including those in India and Pakistan-controlled Kashmir. Some of the region's biggest glaciers can be found in areas between northeastern India and Afghanistan.
We are seeing glaciers melt very fast, and the way they melt is such that we can't estimate how long they will last. We can't guess how much water will flow into our rivers in the next 5 to 20 years, so if this continues, I can see conflicts and disputes in the future between Pakistan and India over water shortages.
Shifts in ice and glacier reserves have already had an impact on agriculture. Farmers in Indian-administered Kashmir are turning paddy fields into apple orchards.
There is a problem of water in the land. The crop is not growing properly. Pollution has increased. There was snow on the mountains. It was slowly melting. The annual paddy crop suffered a loss of 50%.
Local agriculture sustains the bulk of India's and Pakistan's populations, and the two nations have a long history of disagreements over water management. Those disagreements, experts say, will intensify as the glaciers disappear.
If the two countries don't stop fighting, not only will the disputes increase as we can already foresee, but also our two nations' water sustainability will also be impacted. I think we've reached a very interesting point here that not only do the two countries need to stop fighting for ethical and human rights reasons, but also because of environmental reasons.
And South Asia is particularly vulnerable to climate change. Over the next 30 years, if nothing is done, researchers predict water shortages, drought, and rising sea levels could create some 60 million climate refugees in South Asia. For Zubayd Dar in Srinagar, Kashmir, Bejan Hamdard, VOA News.
For over 40 years, novelist Dan Hurley has been writing 60-second long stories about New Yorkers he met on the street. But apart from amusing passers-by with his literary talent, Hurley also happens to be an award-winning science writer. Anna Nelson met with Hurley on the streets of the Big Apple. Anna Rice narrates her story.
Are you ready for your story?
Dan Hurley has been writing for 40 years. In the 1980s, he came up with a genre which he called 60-second novels. 1-minute stories of people he met on the streets, first in Chicago and later New York.
So many people just rush by, they're in a rush, their head is lost in their thoughts. I think it's kind of zen, it's, be here now, let's do this, let's play.
Hurley thought the 60-second novel would be a short-lived experiment, but a little fun grew into a calling.
In April of 1983, I took my typewriter onto the street on Michigan Avenue And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, this is a big mistake. I was starting to feel very embarrassed and nervous. So I sit down, I put the little sign, 60-second novel. Sir, would you like a story? Miss, would you like a story? And everybody's ignoring me. And then a older woman came over and said, what are you doing? I will have a story. And I just talked to her for a minute. And I wrote just a few sentences. I pull it out of the typewriter and there's like 20 people around me. And I read it to her. Everybody claps.
Hurley earned about $50 that day. And that's when it dawned on him that his innocent idea for a fun afternoon could be a lot more than just that. A New York native, he flew to the Big Apple for a weekend, and that first weekend in the city brought him about $500. The decision to leave his job and move to New York City was easy, and Hurley never looked back.
Sometimes I think I'm crazy. I mean, I've done it now for 38 years. I wear a yellow sport coat and a yellow bow tie and a yellow hat. They're like, he must be some kind of performer. Wow, what is this?
His craft may seem easy to an onlooker. Hurley talks to a person for a minute, trying to learn the most important things about him or her, and then he starts typing fast. He doesn't write for an audience, just for this particular person. He says no one else does anything like it.
Some people are lonely. I definitely get people who I feel like I'm the first person they've had a real conversation with in years. Folks tell me about divorce, mental illness. I'm like totally open to them. I'm not judging them. People can tell me the weirdest things. I'm not judging them. I am there to write their story.
After 4 years of writing on the streets, Hurley became famous, and with fame came business offers and opportunities. He was invited to large parties and events. He started to get paid a lot. He bought a house. But instead of feeling happy, Hurley says he felt he was turning into a puppet. He missed talking to passers-by. He missed meeting new people.
When I did it on the street, it's my world. I've invented it. I think people just like this idea that there's someone there listening and waiting.
Because Hurley believes every person is a story worth telling. For Anna Nelson in New York, Anna Rice, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.